This is a tutorial and commentary on the new counteroffer. We're looking at a seller counteroffer and the buyer counteroffer looks the same. They were revised December of 2022. Now I'm recording this toward the end of January 2023, and this is the form that we're stuck with in the meantime. I say stuck with because these garbage provisions were added on to this counter. They really have no business being here. So I'll explain why they're a problem, what we can do about it, and I'll also walk you through this form and explain how to fill it out. So we start with the seller counteroffer number 1. Since we're countering a purchase agreement as the seller, we just put a number 1 as it's the first version. The date we draft this form, by default, it's a counter to the purchase agreement. We put the date of the purchase agreement, the names of the parties, and then we find ourselves here in paragraph 1. Now 1A pertains to liquidated damages. And keep in mind, car forms are legal forms with training wheels. There are all sorts of protections and provisions put in there so that agents just have to plug in numbers and dates and stuff like that, but don't really diverge too much, or they don't have a lot of freedom to just write in terms. So what 1A is doing is it's basically an advisory about paragraph 29 on the purchase agreement, which is liquidated damages. And that is stating that if the buyer breaches and defaults on the purchase, then the buyer can lose their deposit. Their earnest money deposit can be awarded to the seller. And this is basically reminding you that it needs to be initialed. If it doesn't get initialed here by both parties, then it's not activated. So, okay, they're telling us 1A, sure, thanks for the reminder. Now we move on to 1B. Now it's talking about, so it's basically saying, so first off, I just cannot stand 1B and 1C, especially 1C, but I'll get to that in a second. But it says, unless otherwise agreed or altered in another counteroffer. This has no business being in this form. And I'd love to explain why to the author of this text. But so why both these provisions start with that is just absurd. But we'll skip past that because this is just saying unless it's been agreed somewhere else. Well, obviously, okay? Obviously, if it's modified, it'll change in a subsequent counter. But even this is poorly written. This is poorly written text right here. Now, this is talking about the down payment and loan amount to be adjusted in the same proportion as original offer. Okay, the reason they have that, let me scroll up in a purchase agreement. It's because, remember, we're looking at a form with training wheels. We're in a go-kart path with little bumpers on the side of the road, so we can't crash into the edge. We can just bump into the wall and keep driving down the go-kart path. Well, what CAR did is, oh my gosh, scrolling through so many pages. Okay, so they put this little percentage here. Oops, that's the seller credit. Well, they put percentages for the loan amount. So see right here, earnest money deposit, and then loan amount down here. And they're telling you, they're spelling it out. So for those of you that are math adverse, it right here will explain what percentage of the purchase price the initial deposit or EMD is. And same with the loan amount. If you can't calculate 80% of the purchase price or whatever it is, they'll just populate the number, whatever it is right here. But then that probably created a problem. So when they put that training wheel on, a problem occurred. So they're just saying, hey, even if the price changes, if the sales price of the transaction changes in a counter, keep in mind the proportion will be the same. So instead of having to go back and address the earnest money initial deposit amount, instead of it before, if let's say $10,000 was 3%, well, now it just automatically will change that number based on being 3% of whatever the new sales price is. Okay, fine. I mean, you can live with that. I don't think this is necessary, but I mean, we're adding a helmet in addition to the training wheels. But 1C, this is what I just find just absolutely a disqualifier for this form, okay? So I'm going to read it. Bear with me because it's pretty painful, but I'm also going to I'm going to break it down in a layman's explanation. Now we have this same provision up here about the alteration. This is just a nonsense statement. I'm going to skip past it because it's irrelevant. If in the original offer, the appraisal contingency amount is lower than the offered price, So you have the appraisal contingency not matching the offered price because it's lower. The dollar amount of any difference, which they identify as an appraisal gap, bad term again, shall be deducted from the final contract price to create the final appraisal contingency amount. Okay, why are they doing this to us? Why? Okay, well, there's an explanation they give us, okay? They say that it clarifies the difference between the offered price and the appraisal contingency will remain the same even if the purchase price changes. Now, let me just say that, so this is their explanation. It's a summary about changes that are made on car forms. If they just took this, copied it, and pasted it for 1C, it would be better than this mess of verbiage, this crime against text. But instead, they give us this explanation, which is a little bit easier to understand. They're basically trying to keep things proportional, just like in 1B, where the earnest money deposit and the loan amount are proportional or relatively proportional to the sales price. So if you got an 80% loan amount or a 3% earnest money deposit, it can increase in proportion to the sales price. They're trying to do that here. But this can create problems because it's so poorly written. And without expanding further on how it could be rewritten to accomplish its intended goal, this is just no good. This has no business being in a counteroffer. First off, none of these belong in a counteroffer. A counteroffer is this. This is a counteroffer. You just have a bunch of blank lines and you say, what are you changing to the offer? Everything in the offer is okay except blank. What is it? The purchase price? The close of escrow? What is it? That's all the counteroffer is changing. Look at this mess it's become. The counteroffer is just an ugly beast now, okay? But this is what we have to work with. So ironically, look at this form, the size of this form. Look how much is actually dedicated to just changing the terms of the purchase agreement. I mean, this is just shameful. Just shameful. Okay. So what does this mean right here? 1C, what do we do about it? Okay. Here's my advice. In most cases, this will have no bearing on the transaction. Now, in the case that the contingency, the appraisal contingency amount and the sales price don't match, okay? Just hear me out. This is the absolute I'm giving out as what you can do to remedy having potentially problematic verbiage, this mess in here. Because as a broker that oversees hundreds of transactions a year, I can tell you that I see it when it goes wrong. I see the little word that's innocuous on 99% of transactions. I can see when it blows everything into a huge mess and dispute. And I don't want to be around when this thing happens, when something happens due to this. So what do we do about it? Well, if in an offer, the appraisal contingency amount and the sales price do not match, I recommend countering this out if there's a counter. How do you do that? You'd write something to the effect of, and I'll paraphrase here, paragraph 1C of this form is hereby deleted or hereby removed from the agreement. Paragraph 1C of this form, or you can write paragraph 1C of this seller counteroffer dated, and you put the date here if you really want to identify it, is hereby removed from this agreement. That's it. You can write delete. You can write nullified. You can write voided. You can write removed in any, break out your thesaurus and have fun with it, but just get this thing out of here, okay? My rant's over. I'm going to continue on. Other terms is where you write only what you're changing from the purchase agreement. That's it. Sometimes people rewrite terms in purchase agreement. There's no need to. Sometimes people write everything else to remain unchanged. There's no need to. You only write what you're changing, okay? And then this is a list of different addenda that you can add to the counter, and that's it. We're done. This form should be so simple. A counteroffer is the most simple form ever. It's literally the only thing that you don't agree to in the preceding form. All right, and then expiration. It expires on the third date, or you can change when it expires. And that's it. The seller signs and sends it. And if the buyer agrees, the buyer signs. If the buyer doesn't agree, the buyer still signs, but the buyer must check this box here. No matter what, this form has to get signed by both parties if this transaction proceeds. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. I'll be happy to answer. Thank you for watching.